Okay. So,
Marsh, may I speak to you for a moment? There's a
yeah.
few devotees here that may not be as well versed in depth of Shastra and experience as others. They're new. They're chanting 16 rounds here at the kitchen, but they're not. So your classes are usually pretty um, clear, but you may not get too deeply into the Sanskrit jargon and everything. Just a
Okay.
recommendation. This is Jason here.
Hare Krishna.
Hare
This
Krishna.
is Alan and Anant Bihari and
Hare
Al.
Krishna.
Hare
Okay.
Krishna.
You know, for myself, I get a little confused when the classes are too complicated too. So
Okay. Okay.
you know that. Okay, Hare Krishna.
Good. So everything seems to be up and humming as far as our technical side goes here. So let's start with the verse here. Nishamya karma tachambor deva devasya mirdhushaha prajadakshani brahman vaikuntascha shasham side nishamya karma tachambor deva devasya mirdhushaha prajadakshayani Brahma Vaikuntascha Shasham Sire. So that's our verse, and the translation of it reads, upon hearing of this act, everyone, including Bhavani, the daughter of Maharaj Daksha, Lord Brahma, Lord Vishnu, and the people in general very highly praise this deed performed by Lord Shiva, who is worshipped by the demigods and who bestows benedictions upon the people. Upon hearing of this act, everyone, including Bhavani, the daughter of Maharaj Daksha, Lord Brahma, Lord Vishnu, and the people in general, very highly praised this deed performed by Lord Shiva, who is worshipped by the demigods and who bestows benedictions upon the people. There is no purport to this verse, and so I'll read the next verse as well, which is what is scheduled here. And that verse reads, Prakshannam pibata paner yadkinchids jagruhus matat Vrishchikahi Vashao Sadhyo Danda Shukas Chaye Pare Praskannam Pibater Paner Yadkinchids Jagruhu Smatat Vrishchikahi Vashao Sadhyo Danda Shukas Chaye Pare. And this verse translates, scorpions, cobras, poisonous drugs, and other animals whose bites are poisonous took the opportunity to drink whatever little poison had fallen and scattered from Lord Shiva's hand while he was drinking. Scorpions, cobras, poisonous drugs, and other animals whose bites are poisonous took the opportunity to drink whatever little poison had fallen and scattered from Lord Shiva's hand while he was drinking. Here's the short purport here. Mosquitoes, jackals, dogs, and other varieties of Danda Shuka, or animals whose bites are poisonous, drank the poison of the Samudra Mantana, the churned ocean, since it was available after it fell from the palms of Lord Shiva. Okay. Nishamya karma tachchampor deva devasya mirdhushaha prajadakshayani brahma Vaikuntascha Shashang Sire. Upon hearing of this act, everyone, including Bhavani, the daughter of Maharaj Daksha, Lord Brahma, Lord Vishnu, and the people in general, very highly praised this deed performed by Lord Shiva, who is worshipped by demigods and who bestows benedictions upon the people. Praskannam pibater paner yad kinchid jagruhu smatat vrishchikhahi vishau shadhyo danda shukas chaye pare. Scorpions, cobras, poisonous drugs, and other animals whose bites are poisonous took the opportunity to drink whatever little poison had fallen and scattered from Lord Shiva's hand while he was drinking. This chapter is about the churning of the ocean of milk by the combined effort of the demigods and the demons. And so Lord Shiva, he saves the day by drinking the halahala poison, or the kalakuta poison, whichever name you want to use for it. And in this way, the poison that would have been devastating to the entire universe is neutralized and taken away. This chapter, this is chapter 7, Lord Shiva saves the universe by drinking poison. And today, we notice that the verse is basically about the idea of various creatures absorbing the poison, the creatures that we know in our modern world, in our everyday world, as being poisonous, like scorpions and snakes and other creatures who have spiders and things like that, who have a bite that can sometimes be poisonous or even lethal. And, there's not much to elaborate there, but I thought that in general, this whole thing is a very nice metaphor. So, can spiritual progress seem like poison? Certainly, I think all of us have had this experience at one time or another, that it appears like spiritual life is not at all easy go. It's not at all a happy process sometimes. In the long run, it will be, of course, but in the beginning, it certainly is not. And we can ask, why is that? So, the material world is what we've been used to. We have, for many, many lifetimes, tried to enjoy in the material world. We've not really been successful. The material world, of course, does offer us some types of happiness, but it's low level and it's temporary. So when we're given some happiness, it's, quickly gone. Of course, people usually think of the pinnacle of material happiness as sex life, but that's over in a short time. So then we're looking for our next fix, You can only eat so much, you can only enjoy so much in certain kinds of ways. And so the material world offers us some little glimmers of material happiness. But we're never satisfied deep in our heart. We never feel the sense that now I have really come to a deep level of happiness. This we never feel. So then we begin, or we hear about spiritual life, and we understand that happiness does indeed exist, but it doesn't exist on the material level. And then the next thing that we, come in contact with, dang, that, we are, set with how rough a go it is to begin spiritual life. Everything seems like contrary. It seems like pushing us in the wrong way. So this idea of poison coming out of the ocean of milk in SBtTBc20200717 is very appropriate. Often when trying to engage in spiritual life, we are met with setbacks or contrary results. This may cause us to think about giving up. To help others spiritually is always connected with accepting some suffering on our own. So we have kind of two things to analogize to in this particular grouping. And those things are the growth of a devotee, especially in the very beginning, through the difficult phases of starting to come in contact with Krishna consciousness and understand and adopt it. And also the struggle of a Sankirtan devotee who is already involved in Krishna consciousness, but is attempting the very difficult process of helping others, which is also very, very difficult. So naturally, this led me to this verse in Srimad Bhagavad Gita, and it it's actually it's a succession of verses. It's from Bhagavad Gita 18:36 to 39, and interestingly, it uses also this analogy of poison, happiness in the mode of nature. So happiness in the mode of goodness is poison in the beginning and nectar later. Passion, in the mode of passion, happiness is nectar in the beginning and poison later. We know how these two seem to be reversed. So this gives you some indication of what is actually taking place. That when we first come in contact with spiritual life, it seems like poison. But later, as we progress in spiritual life, this evens out and we begin to enjoy spiritual life and we begin to be disinterested in material life. And so it ceases to be poison, but it actually satisfies our soul at a very deep level. However, on passion, the exact opposite things happen. The exact opposite thing happens. We first feel very agitated and sensibly, due to our senses, we feel very titillated. We feel very satisfied, but it only lasts for a short time. And then we discover the old smoking more and enjoying it less principle, where no matter how much we do of anything, we wind up having to do more and more of it. And the problem then is that we graduate to the darker forms of enjoyment as we find that the more simple and less sinful forms of enjoyment no longer satisfy us. So we look for uglier kinds of enjoyment. And this is the nature of this idea that it starts off as nectar. It immediately hits the senses. And since we're used to material enjoyment, we have a ready accessible connection with sense enjoyment when it comes through the senses. However, as we say, it is temporary and it leads to various miseries, not to mention the kickback of the bad karma that we're performing. And then finally, we'll see that in chapter 18:36 to 39, ignorance, this kind of happiness, is delusional, arising from sleep, laziness, and illusion. So we'll look at these briefly because we don't have a lot of time in this class, and so I'm trying to stay on course, stay tuned in. So this is Bhagavad Gita 18:36. Sukham tva idanam Sukham tvidanam trividham shrinu me bharatarshava abhyasyad ramate yatra dukantam cha nigachati. O best of the Bharatas, now please hear from me about three kinds of happiness by which the conditioned soul enjoys, and by which sometimes he comes to the end of all distress. So here we have the three guna avatars in this picture. We have Lord Brahma on the far left, we have in the middle Vishnu, and on the far right Shiva. So Brahma is in charge of the mode of passion, Vishnu is in charge of the mode of goodness, and Shiva is in charge of the mode of ignorance. Now, this is a characterization by Krishna in Bhagavad Gita of happiness in the mode of goodness. Yatad agre visham iva praniname mritot panam tatsukham satvikam proktam atma buddhi prasadajam. That which in the beginning may be just like poison, but at the end is just like nectar, and which awakens one to self-realization, is said to be happiness in the mode of goodness. So when we try to pull the senses away from material aggrandizement, various kinds of material engagements, immediately we are already in a type of distress. It may be really acute, or it may not be so acute. But now we do the other thing. We try to connect the senses with Krishna. And I think mostly everybody has some, aspects of Krishna consciousness that they're just naturally attracted to. And that's what saves us, that when we first come to Krishna consciousness, we find that some aspects of Krishna consciousness we don't have such a difficult time integrating. But there are types of Krishna consciousness that we just have a rough go with, a real rough go with. So then we have to do the struggle. We're not only giving up things we like, but we're accepting things we don't like so much at all. In fact, they may be grating on our sensibilities, on our sense of what comes naturally to us. And this is where the poison part comes in. Of course, if we persevere, we will go past this and we'll discover that we actually like Krishna consciousness. And we'll discover that those things that once attracted us and once seemed very, very important in our lives no longer have the same pull that they once did. So let's look at happiness in the mode of passion, which Krishna describes here. Vishayendriya samyogad yattad agre mritotpanam pariname vishamiva tatsukam rajasam smritam. I'm not sure. Is that the same as the previous one? I didn't change it. No, it isn't the same. I just that happiness, which is derived from contact of the senses with their objects, and which appears like nectar at first, but poison at the end, is said to be of the nature of passion. So happiness in the mode of passion is immediately attractive to our senses. And not only that, we see that everybody around us, this is the only kind of happiness they're interested in, and as far as they know, the only kind of happiness that exists. So people who are engaged in the connection of the senses and the sense objects, they certainly experience a kind of pleasure, but this is temporary and gradually diminishing in its ability to satisfy us. So the more we do of something, of a particular kind of sense gratification, the more it takes to get us to the same level of enjoyment. And then on top of being temporary and on top of being diminishing in its return, the material happiness that we experience has a karmic payment most of the time. It has something that it is going to bite us in the rear end at some point as a result of our enjoyment. So this is what we mean by nectar in the beginning and poison at the end. And here we have the final version, the mode of ignorance version, which is 18.39. Yadagre chanubante cha sukhamohanam atmanha niralasya pramadotam tam tamasam udahritam. And that happiness which is blind to self-realization, which is delusion from beginning to end, and which arises from sleep, laziness, and illusion, is said to be in the mode of ignorance. So when we are looking for happiness, and we are in the mode of ignorance, the kind of happiness that we experience is either from various delusions that we imagine about the world around us, generally speaking, nicely amplified by various intoxicating substances, or our happiness is just crude, like sleeping or being unconscious or procrastinating, all these kinds of things. This is where we get our happiness. As you can see, this is not real happiness at all. But those in the mode of ignorance, they think of this kind of happiness, and it's the happiness that they know, practically speaking, the only happiness that they know. So to kind of crystallize this out, we go back to this slide here. Goodness, poison in the beginning, nectar later. Passion, nectar in the beginning, poison later. Just the opposite. Ignorance, delusional, arising from sleep, laziness, and illusion. Now, besides this, this is the experience that devotees have when they first start Krishna consciousness, this idea of having to war with the senses in a very severe way at the very beginning. But later there's another war that takes place, and that war is when we try to embrace what the spiritual master has asked us to do, embrace the idea of giving Krishna consciousness to others. And this can actually really, really seem like drinking poison. So when we are asked to go out on Sankirtan or meet the public in general, this can really rub our senses in the wrong way. I'm reminded, when I first came to Krishna consciousness, how all this really hit me. I joined Krishna consciousness in the Bay Area in Berkeley, California. And we used to, basically the whole temple was based around going out on Sankirtan every day, which we did 6 days a week. We had one day back, one day where we could, try to fix up things, get ourselves together, and try to do a little reading or whatever it was. But on 6 days of the week, we would all pile into a van, and, we would go out to some place. We would be dropped off by a, Sankirtan leader. We would be dropped off in a parking lot somewhere, kind of in the middle of the material world. And it was just us and our minds and the air, the California air. And you would try to hail people as they were going to their cars. And remember, there's a lot of things that might not be immediately obvious here. This was before cell phones. There was no way to call anybody. So if something happened to you, nobody would find out about it until 8 hours later when they came back to pick you up. Oftentimes, our Sankirtan spots were miles away from one another, and the person that dropped you off would drop you off, and at say 10 or 9 or 10 o'clock in the morning, and then they would come back after you about 5 or 6 o'clock in the afternoon. And all that time, it was just you. There was not another devotee in sight anywhere. And you were trying to convince people to get a Bhagavad Gita or something like that. Of course, we did paraphernalia too, but in the later, better times, we were trying to get across Krishna consciousness. And people had no idea what Bhagavad Gita was. You can imagine, this was before any real knowledge about the Eastern world was really pumped out there. Of course, it was going a little bit with the New Age culture at that time, with the various rock groups bringing Eastern philosophy through music. It was seeping in a bit, but this was only mostly engaged in by young people, and you seldom met young people in the parking lots. You met older people because they were the people who were out there buying stuff and going to the store, going to a Kmart, going to a grocery store. And, oftentimes the store managers naturally were not too appreciative of you being out in the parking lot. And then they would, call the police or tell you if you didn't stop, they were going to call the police. And, at, 1 o'clock or at noon or something like that, you basically, your Sankirtan day was over because you were not allowed by the managers to do any more. You just had to sit there for, 4 or 5 hours until finally the truck came around to pick you up. And, that was the way it worked. And I remember how I was totally unused to accosting people. I never did that in my life at all. I didn't like being forward. I didn't like going up to people. And when I did, mostly it was a clumsy affair. And the devotees had these various little, routines that you could use. And they never seemed to work for me very much. And I struggled with it like anything. And my highlight of the whole day was, taking some prasadam. You would pack something up in a plastic container, and, around about middle of the day, you would pull it out and eat it. And for a short time, the senses were doing something that they could appreciate, and something that they were able to relate to. And then back it was, chasing people across the parking lot. And, trying to show them Bhagavad Gita. What? People had no idea. I remember telling people that, we encourage a vegetarian lifestyle, and, people would reply, oh yeah, vegetarian. My uncle, he's a Presbyterian. They thought vegetarian was some kind of religion, because nobody had any idea what that was back then. It's hard to believe it now, because vegetarianism has really taken off, and at least people are aware of it if they're not following it. But, back then there was no such understanding. So this was the war with the senses. And on top of it, we are trying to help people become Krishna conscious. And people would say, are you sure you're supposed to be here? I'm going to go call the police, have these nice, warm exchanges with people, excuse me, ma'am, did you, can I talk to you for a minute? And, she gives a concerned look, runs to her car, slams the door, and peels out of the parking lot, I don't know what. So, these are the kind of loving exchanges you're having with people out in the parking lot. Or, any rate, this is the kind of thing that happens. So we are trying to control the senses. And then when we try to bring Krishna consciousness to others, it is like, drinking this poison from the ocean of milk that Lord Siva was drinking. I can really relate to this, that Lord Siva was drinking this poison. Of course, it didn't harm Lord Siva. He was all right. But I always remember when everyone got back in the truck after a day of whatever harrowing experiences we went through out there on Sankirtan, there was this feeling of buoyancy that was just, it wouldn't go away. Nothing could change it. For one, you were kind of done with the day's worth of Sankirtan. Now, you could do things that were a little easier to relate to. Uh, like, finally you're off planet Mars, out of your spacesuit, and you are able to just work with people on an ordinary level. So this poison may seem difficult, but ultimately it actually turns into nectar as we continue through in Krishna consciousness. I'll leave some time here for questions, so I'm sure maybe some of you have questions, and let's let it roll. So any realizations, any questions from our audience today?
Raj, can you hear me okay?
Yeah, let me
Not loud enough?
unspotlight.
We accept the principle that you're describing, that some things are difficult at first, but then there's a point when your perception becomes purified and you're feeling a different experience doing the same thing. I have to share that my own experience with distributing books and collecting donations was radically different from what you're describing.
You were much more purified than me.
What you're describing sounds like poor management and harsh, inconsiderate, weird, style of engaging people in Krishna's service. But it's true. I did go through quite an extensive period of trying to see how to approach people nicely. And by Krishna's grace, there were devotees who were just doing this in such a joyful and effective way that people were not bothered. We weren't harassing them, flagging them, disrupting them, scaring them. It was a beautiful, and I would watch in amazement how devotees, the joy that they had, the love that they had for people, the enthusiasm that they had to share what they've experienced was just overwhelming. Even though I couldn't quite figure out how to do it myself, I could see that this can actually be done properly, and Krishna can show you, and it's a wonderful purification to be humble and perseverant and patient and determined and have enough faith to continue in what's been given to you as your prescribed duty. So I don't doubt your experience. I'm just saying that I had a different experience, less painful. I'm not saying that it wasn't awkward. I wasn't very good at it. I wasn't accustomed to it. Didn't prefer it. Actually avoided it for years. But by proper care of the leadership personalities that I was connected to, I was introduced, trained, exposed to, a very, very, profound, and I want to say ecstatic. I mean, really, when we start to actually relax, and Krishna shows us that we're not out there to get anything from anybody, and that it is possible not to bother them, and that it is joyfully performed. It's eye-opening and wonderful. So, you described a difficult time in the beginning. You didn't spend a whole lot of time talking about the highest level of experience, other than the fact that the best experience you had was when it was over. I just want to share that I'm not saying your experience was probably valid, but it's a tribute to your sincerity that you're still a devotee, and that you did go out when you were asked to go out. You did try to care for people, and you did try to give what you'd received. So that's really wonderful. We heard a story that you went to the Rath Yatra in San Francisco, first time you saw devotees, and a devotee was up making a presentation that this is the Lord, and we should give something to the Lord out of love. And so you gave your sneakers, right? Is that true?
Yeah, right.
Because you
That,
really loved the sneakers, and you thought I'm going to give this to the Lord. So you took off your sneakers and put them on Lord Jagannath's card. Is that true? Is
yeah,
that
that's
accurate?
true. That was what I think actually was
Shows
my
what a wonderful, wonderful devotee you are.
mistake that made me Krishna conscious. That I went over the line there.
I'm sure
Jagannath
Lord
said, "All right,
Jagannath was
this
smiling.
guy's a goner." So
I'm sure Lord Jagannath was smiling.
I heard a devotee, making that statement from the podium, from the stage, that whatever you love, whatever you actually find attractive, then you should offer that thing to Krishna. So I thought about my situation. Of course, I was just impromptu. I was there. I hadn't planned or thought about it. I didn't even know hardly what a Rath Yatra was. And so I thought the one thing that I had were these sneakers. They were new. I had just bought them and I really liked them. So I thought, okay, I should give this as an offering. And I put them right in front of big Lord Jagannath. I'm sure later somebody found them and thought, what moron put their shoes here. But it was an offering of love, and Jagannath knew it. And a year later, I was a devotee, So I think that was the thing that put me over. Of course, I have to say that Sankirtan is a different experience these days, even for me. That at one time there was very little understanding of how to approach it. Everybody was just on their own. There was no training. You just got thrown out in a lot, and what you learned was by trying to talk to the other Sankirtan devotees and figure out what they did. And sometimes what they were doing wasn't so brilliant or kosher in some ways. So it was a difficult time. Nowadays with Vaisheshika and other people who are actually very methodical and have really researched the idea from many angles, can, give people a much better experience of it. Still, I think there's this terrifying aspect of it that it takes a long time to get over. It's like public speaking, the very beginning, it's terrifying. But after you do it enough, you hardly even notice it anymore. You start to just flow with it. And it's, I think, the same thing in Sankirtan. Any other questions or realizations?
I remember watching with fascination devotees approaching people. I couldn't take my eyes off it. They're talking to someone and the person is smiling and they're smiling, and and then they would give a donation, and then they would thank the devotee, and then they would hug the devotee or shake their hand, and this is a wonderful thing you're doing. I was thinking, wow, how do they do that? They're just connecting with old people and funny looking people and crazy people and young people and fat people. And I was thinking, this is not possible. This is just miraculous. But Krishna is so wonderful. We want to throw in this somewhere along the class. How wonderful is Krishna?
Yeah.
That he does challenge us. Yeah. And he does help us.
I'm definitely of the opinion that when you see Sankirtan being performed, all the normal laws of physics and nature are suspended. It's something, nothing about Sankirtan makes any sense from any kind of material point of view. How many people are interested in some obscure book from India? How many? Practically none. And even if they are, the idea that you're catching them in between things, and somehow Krishna, only Krishna could make it happen. And we've all had those times in Sankirtan where we do this for hours and hours and absolutely nothing happens. Nobody even looks at us. People sneer at us. We get, rebuked. But then there's those other times where just boom, boom, one person to the next, to the next, to the next, just takes a book for whatever reason, and it makes no sense. There's the laws of statistics are suspended, the laws of human dynamics are suspended, the laws of common sense are suspended, the laws of probability as far as interest in human beings. All those are suspended. It's like watching the material world completely turn itself inside out. And then once you stop Sankirtan, everything just goes back to normal. Laws of physics are again there, laws of statistics are there again, everything. So it's obviously the super soul. If one thing gives you a direct experience of Krishna, it's Sankirtan.
There's a wonderful purification goes on, because when you're asking people to accept some austerity, like giving a donation, they look at you very carefully, right?
Yeah.
They really look at you very carefully, and you have to look at yourself very carefully and your motivation. Because if you're somehow just trying to manipulate them, fast talk them, guilt trip them, flim-flam them, people pick up on that. They're not stupid. But
Give the interruption, the conscience is blown.
Okay, Hare Krishna, glory to Prabhupada.
Okay, so thank you all very much. All glories to Srimad Bhagavatam. All glories to the Vaishnava devotees. Haribo!
Chandrasekhar Maharaj ki jai.
Right.